Hello and welcome to Summit 2020 by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Today we're going to be talking about Europe, the Green Deal, the Circular Economy Action Plan, and we're very fortunate to have with us Executive Vice President Frans Timmermans in charge of the Green Deal live from Brussels. Hello Frans, thanks very much for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
Let's start by looking at the current context, and it's been very clear early on in the COVID crisis and the recovery that was needed that the Green Deal and the Circular Economy Action Plan as part of this was one of the key pillars of that recovery to deliver better growth. Can you elaborate a bit on this and maybe tell us how you think these frameworks could permeate the industrial strategy of Europe going forward?
Well, you know, before the pandemic, we already knew that we had a climate crisis to address. We already knew that we were in the middle of an industrial revolution. But because things were going quite well with the economic growth, etc., many thought we could postpone some of the decisions or start them, but, you know, wait a bit or let's see what happens. What COVID has done is taken away other options other than now change. And so when we recover, we need to make sure we recover in a way that prepares us for the 21st century and doesn't take us back into the 20th century. And much will depend on the political choices that will be made these months and next years. And if we make the wrong choices, we will create tremendous amounts of stranded assets and we will not take our economy forward. If we make the right choices based on the Green Deal, based on the need to digitize our economy, based on the need to increase our resilience, we can use the opportunities of the Industrial Revolution to transform our economy into a circular economy, in an economy that is no longer dependent on primary resources, that it can change its energy mix and that can create sustainable jobs for people who are really, really scared that they might lose a job because of the crisis as a result of the pandemic.
And that's a really important point to pick up on, because circular economy is not a technicality like it used to be. It's not all about material resources and management. It is about people. It's a project for society. So just in the same way as there is a just transition conversation happening with countries, what do you think it means at individual citizens level and what it means for society as a whole?
Well, we have to be, if you look at the present state of our industry in many, many sectors, we have to be brutally honest that if we don't transform, if we don't reorganize, if we don't reorient, a lot of our capacity will be lost. Industrial capacity will be lost. Other parts of the world will pick up much faster. But if we do use this opportunity to actually transform our industries, to help them, jump into the 21st century, you will create new opportunities. We're still the biggest market in the world. We still have the best connections. We still have very highly educated people. We still have social systems that help us transform into the new economy. Europe could be the leader in this transformation into a sustainable economy, circular economy, and it needs to be done. It's not sort of one of the options we have for the future of our economy. We can not continue with the economy based on digging up stuff, making something out of it and throwing it away again. Mother Earth cannot sustain that.
And you talk about brave political choices as part of that. I mean, the system clearly is incentivizing linearity as we know it. What do you expect to see in terms of potential divisive discussions, unpopular measures that will need to be pushed forward when it comes to taxation of pollution, for instance? What do you foresee happening on that front?
Well, I think we need to be very honest about the fact that, like in any fundamental transformation in our society, and we are going through a fundamental transformation, as I said, there's the pandemic, there's the climate crisis, but there's also the Industrial Revolution. There are quickly changing international relations. When things change so quickly, the one issue that will always come on the table again is the issue of redistribution. Because if you don't organize in a political sense, especially in a democracy, if you don't organize redistribution, then a very small group of people will profit hugely from the new opportunities, and a very large group of people will be left behind and will suffer greatly. So this is all about redistribution. And one of the essential elements in redistribution we will have to face is how we share our limited natural resources. And to make that more equitable and more honest, we will have to put a price on our natural resources, and then also change our taxation systems so that the taxation system reflects the fact that our natural resources are limited resources, are limited production facilities, and that we need to make sure that we use them in the most efficient way and in a sustainable way. And for that, many things will have to change, as you mentioned, especially also our taxation systems.
And that really is looking at the fundamentals of the system and in a way going way beyond environmental, social governance, as we've seen. Interestingly, the ESG funds have been the ones outperforming everything on the market since the past 4 months. Do you foresee those financial trends being really here to stay and leading us to a tipping point when it comes to that?
Yes, I do. I do, because you see, people in the financial world, whether it's investors, whether it's bankers, they make very rational decisions. And they have seen that if they do not change the way they invest, if they do not invest in a circular economy, in a future-oriented, sustainable economy, they will create for themselves huge amounts of stranded assets. The money they will then invest in the old economy will be lost to them within 5 to 10 years. So I think there's a revolution going on also in what is traditionally seen as very conservative investment world. They understand that to safeguard their interest and their assets, they will have to invest in the sustainable economy. So I do believe this is not just something they're doing because it's the right thing to do. They're doing it also because it's a smart thing to do from an economic and a financial perspective.
And as part of the European Green Deal, within that, the Circular Economy Action Plan, there is also a very important biological dimension, and that could be seen in the Farm to Fork initiative, which you've been in charge of as well, and really pushing forward. Can you tell us a bit more about what that entails for the European agricultural sector?
Well, it entails innovation. It entails a lot of investment. It entails a new relationship between the agricultural sector and the natural environment. And it certainly entails the realization that for the future of our agricultural sector, we need to create a healthy balance between agriculture and the natural environment. And sometimes this balance is lost. And the ones who will suffer most if we don't restore the balance are the people in the agricultural sector. And they have so many opportunities for sustainable food production. They have opportunities to create huge amounts of carbon sink that will create even negative emissions if we do it right. They can also reestablish natural equilibriums, whether it's in the aquatic environment, in the oceans, or on land. For instance, pollinators. You cannot have a sustainable agriculture without healthy pollinators. Well, the way we use pesticides today, pollinators are disappearing at an incredible rate. The way we use pesticides and other production methods today, we risk losing 1 million species, which will be at the detriment of humanity in a very, very quick way. I mean, if COVID has taught us anything, it should be that there is something wrong in our relationship with our natural environment and that we need to correct this. And agriculture could be at the forefront of creating this successful correction. But also here, we will need massive investment to create the most modern agriculture, to help our people in agriculture adapt to this, to retrain them, and also to give them opportunity to invest in the newest production systems that are sustainable.
I'm picking up on that idea of carbon sinks, which is really interesting because it bridges the gap between biodiversity and climate to a certain extent. And 2020 was going to be the super year for biodiversity and climate. Of course, the situation is a bit different and things have been pushed back. Does that mean as well that you have more time to sharpen some of the arguments that you want to bring to COP15 in China, and we'll go back to China a bit later in the conversation, but also COP26 in Glasgow? And how do you elaborate on that idea that regenerating natural systems, which is key to the circular economy, is also a very sound climate-friendly strategy?
Well, we will keep the pressure on. We will continue to work at the same pace we had envisaged before, because we really quickly need to deliver some of this. You've seen this in Farm to Fork. You will be seeing this shortly when we present our emissions reduction goal for 2030. And I honestly believe that this is an opportunity that cannot be lost. We need to invest in these things right now. For instance, we want to very quickly make plans so that we can add 3 billion trees to Europe, which would create a huge amount of carbon sink. We need to green our cities, which is not just creating carbon sink, it's improving the air quality in cities, it's bringing down temperatures in cities that are heating up too quickly, and it's hugely improving livability of cities. So we have so many interesting projects we can develop on that to create a better balance with our natural environment. And one thing I wanted to add, we are going to start a renovation wave that will create the possibility to have carbon neutral living, to have energy neutral housing, or even energy producing housing, which will also largely improve the livability of our housing system, but also create a better balance with our natural environment. Just imagine if you start building in a carbon neutral way, that has a huge positive impact on natural environment as well.
And of course, these jobs, by their very nature, are non-offshoreable, so they're local because You're not shipping the building somewhere else to be retrofitted, right?
Exactly. They are local and they are across the board. This is small and medium-sized enterprises, from pop and mom jobs right up to the biggest corporations in the world. All could be part of this renovation wave. Just imagine what you can do with the latest generation of solar panels, with the latest generation of wind turbines, what you can do in creating sustainable transport systems, bringing more cycling to cities. I mean, there are so many things we can do that will rebalance our relationship with natural environment and at the same time create sustainable jobs for people who are really looking for them.
So that's a really important local dimension. If we take a step back and look at the international dimension of these questions, and you've been a Minister for Foreign Affairs for the Netherlands prior to your role at the Commission, how do you see that Green Deal, climate, circular economy conversation play out on the international scene, and more particularly with China, which is one of the key partners, but also Africa, which was very high on the list of Europe this year?
Well, there's two ways of looking at this. If you're honest, you have to say that international relations are quite choppy, quite rough, quite difficult right now, wherever you look. At the same time, if you take a step back and look back 5 years ago, I would not have thought 5 years ago that we would have this sense of urgency across the board in the world as far as the climate crisis is concerned, as far as the biodiversity crisis is concerned. So at the end of the day, on balance, I remain optimistic. There is a willingness, an increasing willingness I see also in China to be part of the solution, to not be part of the problem. I think we have, as Europeans, a huge opportunity to create a really dynamic relationship with our sister continent, which is Africa, on this, which could combine the need to bring energy, electricity to Africa with the need to bring more sustainability to Africa, to help Africa adapt to climate change, to mitigate the consequences of climate change, and at the same time help Africa develop, because the potential of Africa is always underestimated. This continent with so many very young, dynamic, talented people could be Europe's lifeline also to our own economic growth of the future. So we have a huge opportunity, but then we have to be credible in terms of the way we want to support Africa in Africa's own plans to bring energy to every locality in Africa, to bring mitigation efforts to Africa, and also to show that we are part of helping Africa adapt to new climatological circumstances, which are very often very difficult for them, and also fight some of the scourges that are afflicting Africa, such as natural disasters, such as the locust problem they've had in Eastern Africa, etc. But I think there is really opportunity for a deep partnership between these two continents that, we need each other. We need each other. Europe needs Africa just as much as Africa needs Europe.
And how about China in all of this? Because the European Union signed an MOU on circular economy in 2018 with China, which hints at a couple of potential developments. One of these could be product standards and the definition of what could be a circular product. Of course, as you said, Europe is the biggest market on the planet. Joining forces with China would mean that you could potentially tip the global economy overnight into circularity.
Yeah, but I also think that I truly believe that it's the jury might still be out there and decisions still need to be taken, but I'm relatively optimistic about China's willingness to move in the same direction, just out of self-interest, which is logical because we also act out of enlightened, I hope, self-interest. But I also believe that there are huge opportunities with the United States to move in the same direction. We have very comprehensive and deep contacts with states of the United States, with cities and regions, and especially corporations. And I believe this could create a dynamic together with China, together with Africa, and hopefully together with other parts of the world. I'm really enthusiastic about what's happening in Southeast Asia and many parts of that incredibly important continent. So I'm on balance rather optimistic, but I also have to be realistic about the fact that international relations are choppy, are going to remain difficult for the foreseeable future. And Europe has a huge role to play in creating the right environment for constructive multilateralism.
Which of course begs the question of the place of Europe as a leader. Part of your job is to enshrine climate objectives into European law, so that's no small feat. How do you think that Europe can become a real voice to take everyone on board and make sure that the dynamic of the Paris agreements is sustained?
Well, I'm encouraged by the position taken by member states in the European Council. I'm encouraged by the very strong support we have in the European Parliament. But most of all, I'm encouraged by the fact that regardless of the pandemic, regardless of people's worries about their jobs and their health, there is still a very, very strong public support in the European Union for the Green Deal, for doing the right thing to take us out of the climate crisis. And this is extremely encouraging for all policymakers and for everybody active, also in the NGO community in this area. The public want us to do this. The public expect us to do this. And the only thing we have to prevent is for the public to become sort of discouraged because they think this is no longer feasible. I no longer fear those who pretend there is no climate crisis. I fear a situation where we become desperate, that we believe we cannot fix it anymore. We can fix this. If humanity can fix something, it is this. It is an existential threat to the human race, but the human race can face that threat and face it down.
As a way to conclude this conversation, I'd like to take your perspective because you have been in charge of the previous Circular Economy Action Plan in Europe, and it would be interesting to get your take on how the idea evolved, how it's a more holistic, systemic proposition than it ever was. What do you think was the best contribution to that sort of progress in the debate?
Well, I think the early successes in certain areas, the fact that the whole idea of how you treat waste was revolutionized in the last 5 years, the fact that most industries are now very quickly buying into this, the fact that you see more and more coordination between public authorities at all levels, because the circular economy can only work if you start at the local level and end at the global level. And I think we've seen a very interesting dynamic on all these levels. And as you know, like anything you do in life, if it has a success, it will attract other people. And I think the momentum we see now across the board for the circular economy is impressive. And this has really changed only in the last couple of years. When we presented our first action plan, it was something for the initiated, for the happy few. And now it's become more or less the buzzword across the across all economic activities, frankly.
Frans Timmermans, thank you very much for joining us today.
It was my pleasure.